It would be a complete disservice to us here in the office to not listen to our drivers when they're the ones that have been out there doing it. The biggest thing that we've lost is that human connection in sales.
Hello and welcome to CB Talk, the Combined Transport Blackwell Monthly Podcast. Today is January 24th, 2025, and I'm your host, Nick Card, Vice President of Operations. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We've got a great interview coming up with Jake Wells, Director of Sales. But before we get into that, first, the news. Our drivers and employees of the month for this month: Greg Allen for Glass and Flatbed, Ron Tyron for Blackwell, Ed Heath for Heavy Haul, and Faith Whiteman as our corporate employee of the month. Thank you guys so much and congratulations. Appreciate all of your hard work. Our safety topic of the month is winter driving. Make sure that you stay focused on the road. Make sure that you know techniques for driving on icy roads for poor visibility. Make sure you manage your speed. And remember to keep an eye on your tires and your tire chains. Those are the only things that are keeping you from sliding sideways on the road. So make sure that those things are in good condition. Know the tire chain laws and make sure you obey them. In the news this month, the American Trucking Association is forecasting a 1.6% growth in truck volumes in 2025, which should end a 2-year decline. This is going to be really exciting because 2024 was a pretty flat year, especially coming off of 2023, which was a really down year. So it's nice to see the market recovering. We're seeing inflation is on the decline, and hopefully investment will continue. A new administration in the White House definitely can shake things up, so we'll see where that is going. Truck tonnage is expected to rise by in excess of 2 billion tons in the next decade, continuing the tradition of growth and prosperity that we've seen in this country. We're seeing trucking continue to maintain its dominance. In 2024, trucking was almost 73% of freight tonnage and almost 77% of freight revenue. There's no signs that even with new investments in rail, that trucking is going anywhere but up. And speaking of rail, there has been a decline in rail freight. Projections say that rail will likely drop from about 10.5% this year to under 10% over the next decade. A big factor of that is declining coal volumes, but we are also seeing, again, a shift to more home delivery, which is driving trucking and, in particular, less than truckload to distribution centers on the rise. Intermodal is continuing to rise, containers in and out of ports. Depending on Trump administration tariff practices, this could be in flux, but based on current trends, we'll see that to continue to rise pretty steadily, 2 to 3% year over year for the next decade. And with that, it's time for the interview. With me in the studio today, I have Jake Wells, our Director of Sales. Jake has been with the company over, 20 years? You are, my gosh, you're probably the best family man I know. You've got 4 kids. You're getting ready to send one off to college. You know trucking inside and out. You've been doing this a long time. Jake, welcome to the program. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
I want to get started. 20 years is a long time.
Right.
Let's see. We've had, my dad was on the program. We had Jason on the program. I think you're probably number 3 in terms of long, or maybe has Chris been here slightly longer than you?
Maybe Chris Clark.
Okay.
Right.
But you've seen a lot over your time here, and especially from a sales side, it's a little different, I'm sure, than sort of what Chris has seen on the operations side. What have you seen in that last 20 years? What would you say is your most significant, I don't know, what's your most significant growth? What's the change that you've seen that's been the most meaningful for you? What's your take on that past?
Yeah, I talk with drivers a lot about kind of where I started at Combined Transport, where I'm at now, what that looks like, and And also just how the company's changed over the years. And, I'm proud of a lot of the changes that Combined Transport's made over the years. But, for me, you mentioned my family and obviously we're out here, we're doing a job. We want to enjoy our job, but in the end, we want to make sure that we're providing as well. And so I've always looked at not only what can I do for Combined Transport and how can I grow here, but, the reason we want to do that is because we have personal goals in our life too. So 20 years is a long time. 20 years is how long I've been married to my wife. 20 years is, I think shows a lot of dedication to not only here at Combined Transport, but, on my personal side too. So, in that I've gone through obviously a lot of personal changes, like you mentioned, 4 kids. My oldest is 17 and will be graduating this summer. And my youngest is, 9 years old. I can't even believe that, I'm about to have, soon enough, I won't have anything but teenagers and adults in the house. So, but as far as Combined Transport goes, they are the company that I've kind of grown with that's given me those opportunities to provide for that family, to grow in my career, to grow in my knowledge. So it's been good. It's been good not only personally, but I've also seen a lot of growth for Combined Transport. And, one of the things, Nick, that you and I like to discuss a lot and the things that excite me is what can we do to evolve? What can we do to grow? What can we do to stay ahead of the curve? And that's what I see at Combined Transport that kind of keeps me excited and keeps me going over this time.
Mm-hmm. So I know we've got a lot of people in the company who have started in the last few years. Any advice that you'd give them as they're launching their future careers?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether that's here in the office or whether that's as a driver for Combined Transport, my advice remains the same. And I know it's kind of the cliche that talk is cheap, but I really think that it's so true in the workforce that a lot of people have ideas and a lot of people want to talk about ideas. But what I look for and what I do believe the reason that I was able to grow the way I did at Combined Transport is because I chose to just walk the walk rather than talking the talk ahead of time. So, for example, whether that's in the office and you have aspirations of moving into sales or into some kind of management, what are we looking for? What do I look for when I see that? I look for people who are natural leaders who actually want to step up and say that they'll do the extra work, they'll put in the extra time, and not just talk about it, but actually just go do it. And the same thing goes for drivers. I've worked with a lot of drivers over these years, and I've seen a lot of drivers grow in their career, which is it's a big thing that I advocate for when I talk to our drivers. But those drivers that go above and beyond, they have a good attitude while they do it, and they genuinely look like they want to learn, are the drivers that I tend to see do really well and move up from whether that might be flatbed into heavy haul into multi-axle. There's so many different growth opportunities here, both in the office and over the road. And that's, again, like I said, one of the things that I really appreciate about Combined Transport.
Absolutely. One of the things as you're talking, sort of the doing part of it,
right,
there's also the responsibility piece of it, right? I mean, like as we grow and we take on more, we also end up taking on really a responsibility to, having a team and making sure that they're all successful. As you sort of think ahead, right, from a sales side, obviously, one of those big challenges is going to be how do we continue to grow our customers, grow loads, make sure we have the miles available for the drivers. As you think ahead to 2025, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're in 2025
right
already. Happy New Year's, everybody. As we think ahead to 2025, how are you seeing sort of the freight market? What are your guys' targets? How are you going to help take your team forward into that new environment?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that's even worded great because I do think that it's a year-to-year evaluation that we have to make. For a long time we saw a downward trend in glass, and so we needed to pivot and say, okay, we need to focus our efforts outside of glass. 2025, I think we're going to start seeing an upward trend back in our specialized glass division. And, Chris and I working together are looking at ways to rebuild that fleet, rebuild that program up to be profitable and make sense not only for Combined Transport, but also for our drivers as well and what their desires and wants are. One of the big things that I've really been focusing on over the last, I would say, year and a half, 2 years is how do we diversify specifically within our over-the-road fleets. We've talked about this challenge a lot for years now, that local jobs, regional jobs have really made a lot of sense for drivers. And we tend to, when we see people leave combined transport, one of the biggest reasons has always been those types of positions, not necessarily anything that combined has done wrong. So I think that more that we focus on whether it's specialization in goods, which some of those examples that we're looking at is power systems, aerospace, data centers, but also the way that we look at the way that we run our fleets and manage our fleets. And that may mean that we do find more regionally based or lane based runs that suit our drivers for what they need and they desire, because not only are they trying to make a living, but they also want to be home. They also have families just as I do. So those, I think in 2025, swing back to your question there, in 2025, my personal goals are exactly that. Aerospace has been something that's been very interesting to me. I think it's an emerging market that it's not too late to get onto and really specialize ourselves in that market, whether that's by new or different types of equipment, or just the way that we even handle our customers and think about different ways that we service our customers. And a lot of that comes to not only how we handle it here in the office, but how our drivers handle that on the road, which is a big part of what I wanted to discuss today too, is how those two intermingle.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great segue. You know, one of the things as you were talking, I was thinking about is the fleet manager. We've done a lot of transition there in terms of service to drivers. So I would love to get your take on sort of, especially from a sales side, how's the fleet manager transition going? And how is that sort of driver sales relationship? How's that changed over the years? What do you see going forward? I think that's a really interesting place because it's kind of the core of the business. Drivers don't have freight if we don't have sales. Sales don't have drivers our sales don't have customers if we don't have drivers to move the freight. So I mean, it's a very
symbiotic relationship, right?
Absolutely.
So fleet managers, let's start there. Fleet managers was looking back at it, kind of a risky change that we decided to make, and we had our reasons. The biggest reason being that we saw that the attention that we needed to be able to give to the drivers needed to be a little bit more personal, and that was really hard to do when we were dispatching geographically. Because while yes, the fleet, you'd get to know the fleet from time to time, it really became apparent that with a fleet manager, not only could we look at getting to know a smaller fleet a little bit more intimately, know what just like our discussion is here, is like, what makes Jake, what makes Nick. When we moved to fleet managers, I really seen that we have been able to change that ability, and the smaller fleets among the fleet managers have allowed some of those relationships. And what that does is, in my opinion, allows better conversations and a better understanding of what each individual driver's needs are. Because combined transport has always been about this. You're not just a number, you're a name, you're a person. And this fleet manager program has really allowed us to keep that at the center of our focus. Keep that idea that if you really want to be able to be a team, which we claim that we want to be between office staff and drivers, there's got to be that personal relationship there to an extent, so that everybody feels that they are contributing, that they have value. So that's the biggest change I've seen there. I think it's helped in efficiency. I think it's certainly helped with making sure that we're continuing to put driver home time, truck and trailer maintenance, so that the drivers are taken care of by operating good equipment. So overall, the fleet manager change, while risky, while we definitely have had our hiccups and bumps and we're not done, fine tuning it, it's been an overall net positive. And for sales, I think that it's helpful because it helps with our ability to be a little bit more predictable with our equipment. It helps us to be able to pitch to our customers where our lanes really are, what our drivers are really capable of, and how to sell to that. And that's a really important factor because, price is not always king. Service has always been Combined Transport's number one selling factor, and to be able to offer good service, we need to be able to predict what our fleet can and can't do and have realistic expectations for that.
Sure. Well, from an equipment side, I see the service challenges every day. It's
Right.
not just a price; it's a level of service. And from my seat, one of the biggest challenges that I see is technology. Instead of making us have better service. In fact, I think if anything, the more we've modernized and updated through technology, the worse our service has gotten, because we've now just outsourced it to whatever the technology can do, and that's good enough.
Right.
I mean, this silly example, I walked into a Taco Bell the other day for lunch, and I stood around for 20 minutes waiting for someone to come take my order. And then when finally somebody from the kitchen finally came out and was like, "Oh, we don't take orders at the counter, you have to punch it in at the machine." And it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, we've lost the human touch.
We've lost the human touch, exactly. Yeah. And so part of why I really like the fleet manager transition is it does bring more of a human focus. Our process, not that we weren't human focused before, but by being so regional focused, you lose some of the relationships.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's in a way, you could say that it's kind of counterculture what Combine's doing here, while we see the rest of the world around us, including our customers, going so technology-based, AI-driven, automation. Here we are saying, no, we need to slow it down a little bit, and we need to take care of our drivers in a way that makes sense. And that human touch, I think, is necessary, and I think it's helpful.
Well, I mean, I know with some of the stuff you're talking about, some of these different areas and products and freight types, if you're driving from hey, I've got a small transformer on an RGN, to now I'm dealing with an excavator, now I'm dealing with data center, now I've got some piece of aerospace equipment, I'm oversized, I'm not oversized. It is a challenge for a driver to make sure that they're doing everything correctly with all those freight types. And so having a personal touch, that's the only way we can deliver that level of service our customers expect.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And there's a lot to what these drivers are encountering over the road. And that's, one of the ideas for fleet managers is that they have a resource that when they have questions, they know it may not be that fleet manager that can answer it, but they know that if they can reach somebody, that person can get them to the right answer. And honestly, I know that you kind of brought up a little bit, and I think we got away from it, but the idea of how does sales and drivers really that relationship look, and I think it's something that it cannot be overstated. Sure. One of the things that I've said, especially as I've grown here over the 20 years, is that I came into the trucking industry with very little to no knowledge. And I was never a driver, so I don't have that hands-on experience that a lot of our drivers expect or see. But I can tell you, and I tell drivers this a lot, I can tell you the one thing that I have done and that has helped me not only become a better dispatcher, but a better salesperson, is learning from these experienced drivers on the road. A lot of the conversations when I spent years in heavy haul, as you know, Nick, and every single load can bring up, you cannot train for every problem that they're going to encounter over the road. But as a salesperson, we have to be able to help walk them through it, even though we may not have ever done it. So where did I get that information? Where did I get that experience? Well, obviously some of my managers that have taught me, but a lot of it has been from drivers that have been willing to be patient with the new guy, whether that's, in sales or whether that's in dispatch fleet management. But it would be a complete disservice to us here in the office to not listen to our drivers when they're the ones that have been out there doing it. They have the eyes on the machine. If it's an excavator and they're trying to get it to fit, if it's a power screen. However, the same respect goes that, I have learned a lot, while not with my hands, but verbally through pictures and through training from other drivers of how to handle certain scenarios. And so, here in the sales office, when we are trying to offer suggestions, it's not because we are claiming to know how to do everything, but it's just to try to give everybody's different perspective, right? We got to come up with a solution, and everybody has a perspective that can help come to that solution. But for me personally, I've learned a ton from the drivers about troubleshooting, about equipment, and just about how to, really operate over the road. So that's key. That's key in sales. And then the other part of that, if you don't mind if I keep going,
Absolutely,
is the idea that you guys not only are our eyes on the road, the drivers are out there all day, every day. I can tell you a story exactly of one of the customers that I've got this in 2024. The reason I got that customer is because I was actually on a family trip down to LA, and I drove by a unit on a trailer that I had never seen before. And so I Googled that in my phone, once I stopped. And from there, I called when I got back into the office. And sure enough, we were able to get into the door with that customer. But drivers, they see this all day, every day. And I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 20 years, and it still blows my mind when a driver comes and sits in my office and we're just catching up, seeing how things are going. And they say, hey, have you ever heard of this company or this company? I drive by this on my way home. And I'm like, never heard of it. There are so many new opportunities out there that we don't know about here in the office. It doesn't matter how much you Google, doesn't matter what sales leads you try to follow. Drivers are an invaluable resource for new customers, and it benefits the company. And in turn, we hope that it benefits the drivers too, because more freight means you can make more money, and it also gives us more opportunities to find lanes that get you home on time to spend with your family. So those are just a couple of the ways, and I can go on more as we go into this conversation, but those are key, and they're something that I always encourage drivers. You have valuable information. Don't be afraid to share it with your fleet manager, your division manager, myself directly. We would be foolish not to take those suggestions and see if we can help build the combined transport team up.
Sort of hitting on sort of this nexus, you're talking about technology, talking about driver engagement. 20 years, we've seen a lot. Now, granted, you and I weren't really around sort of in the pre-cell phone era of driving, though I've heard the stories. But I mean, obviously, with Motive, with changes in OBCs, with changes in truck technology, like the communication aspect. When I remember when I first started here, it's like we didn't have the level of tracking and information we have today, and even what we had this year is so different from what we've had last year.
Right.
And so how have you seen that sort of technology, the role technology is playing in terms of, bridging that divide for drivers, helping make it easier for sales and dispatch, for the now fleet managers as they work with drivers, and vice versa, for drivers out over the road?
Right. Well, I think that we could do a whole podcast episode that'd be kind of fun about what we've seen technology-wise over the last 20 years here, Nick. I mean, remember when we started with the terminals?
The dumb terminals.
Yeah. Green screen, one little monitor.
So just a side note on that, we were cleaning out the attic and we found these a few years back, but I have this memory of these old dumb terminal computers sitting on the desk. They're quite large, but they're not like big screens.
No.
They are physically just there, but the screens are tiny. I mean, we
was
used
it
to
like
work on
8x8 maybe?
Oh wait, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to work on these tiny little screens, and that was all that we had.
Yeah, I remember because I came to Combined Transport directly out of college, and I'm not a Mac or Apple fan, but that's what they used at SOU. So here I am going from used to starting to use the Mac equipment for the last 3 years, and then I get this job at Combined Transport, and I'm looking at this thing that I have no idea. I'm like, where's the mouse? What is this? So I know that those were a little bit of a shock. We've obviously since moved on. But yeah, technology, blessing and a curse. And I don't know, I bet the drivers would probably agree with that to an extent. I know on the sales front, we talked about losing that human aspect, and that's 100% a challenge that our salespeople face today is so... I don't even think it's wrong to say almost the whole majority of customers prefer to deal via email, and I would say voicemail. Good luck getting somebody on the phone. Obviously, we don't have that expectation with our drivers to our fleet managers. We have the exact opposite expectation that you will get somebody on the phone and that you will get calls back. But when on customer front, technology has been great because searching for customers, finding information about customers is way easier than it ever used to be. We used to work at my little salesman books or whatever they were that, every year they'd print a new edition, and I'm, looking through pages trying to find leads that way. Now, we have the internet as a resource and the world's at our fingertips, only to find out that even still you're going to miss opportunities unless you're really listening to other people and drivers as well. But that's been a hard adjustment, and I think that's been over the 20 years. I think that's on if I'm speaking strictly from a sales perspective, the biggest thing that we've lost is that human connection in sales. And I get it. I can be very efficient too when I'm not answering the phones and I'm just buckling down and answering emails. So I understand it. But it is frustrating from a salesperson's perspective because it's much harder to sell yourself in an email than it is if you actually get somebody on the phone or meet somebody face to face. So as far as that goes, yeah, blessing and a curse. I love the technology. I love, beginning to work with AI and seeing things that used to be kind of monotonous tasks that I can assign elsewhere and not spend so much time on. However, it also has driven away that reason that I actually enjoy sales is the people. That's why I do what I do. I think it's why I'm good at what I do. So for me, I've lost a lot of that luxury over the 20 years of really enjoying that part of the job just because technology has gotten in the way of that. On the other hand, with drivers or sales to drivers and drivers themselves, we've got a lot of technology that probably automates a lot of what they do, but there's still a learning curve there, right? So that's why I would say that the drivers would agree there's probably a blessing and a curse. Do you remember the pushback we got when we went to automatics?
Oh yeah.
Do we still have guys that I think we still have a couple of guys that just refuse?
Yeah, we still have a few. Well, yeah, there's still probably a few that are out there, but it's it used to be, when we first started adopting automatics, there are downsides, sure, blessing and a curse like all technology, but today I would definitely say there's a much larger portion of the fleet that says you can take the automatic out of my cold dead hands,
right,
than the reverse. And
right.
It was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where even just having an automatic in your fleet, who's going to drive that? No one's going to drive that truck. That's terrible.
It was heresy.
It's heresy.
Yeah, and no, we have seen that shift, and I agree with that. And that's, with much technology, sometimes slow to adapt, but then you can't, just like with cell phones. My kids don't even know what it means to have life without a cell phone. Well, how did you communicate? Well, I actually had to, when I got to my friend's house, I actually had to call my parents and say, I made it here. But going back to the technology on the driver front, with Motive, I think we've seen some massive improvements there, just with a little bit more real-time updates. It allows us to help the drivers. It allows us to give them some space too, while we can kind of still track and give our customers the updates they require without having to distract the drivers while they're on the road.
So to circle back to something you were talking about with sales, obviously the lack of the human touch, we're seeing so much happen on emails. Do you think drivers can be a part of our human touch on sort of a sales front? Because they're there at our shippers and receivers. Is that a role that they can play as part of the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Even before this time, but now especially in this time, it's extra important, and it is exactly another relationship that sales and the drivers on the road have to not only discuss but work together on. And the fact is that it's hard for me to be on the road a lot. It's hard for me to get customers on the phone. However, drivers are the face of combined transport. Drivers are the ones who sometimes my customers will see our drivers before they ever see me. And I would say that that's more likely than not. So that becomes especially important, especially as we look at some of these higher profile customers that we're looking at, some of these more specialized products that we're wanting to haul. The way we present ourselves and our ability to have a positive representation of the company it's a big deal. It really matters. And it can be the make or break decision on whether or not customers decide that combined transport is going to service them correctly based on their interactions with our drivers, how that not only just how their attitude was, but just how they maintained their equipment, how efficient they were. And honestly, we hope that our drivers have a good attitude and good things to say about our company, because if not, then we're not meeting that expectation for our drivers. How are we ever going to meet that expectation for our customers? So that is a huge, huge deal for me in sales, that our drivers are not only feeling that they're being treated fairly, but they're happy where they're at, and that they feel that they have those same growth opportunities that I have, because satisfied and happy drivers translates in front of our customers, and customers see that, and we need all of the help we can get to get that exposure in front of the customers, especially if it's hard for me to get out on the road and see them personally. So it is a big deal, and it's a big point that I want the drivers to realize how much they actually are involved in that process, that sales process. Whether they realize it or not, don't sell yourselves short. Like, it is a big deal, and you guys contribute largely to the success of Combined Transport for that reason alone.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we have nominally our job silos and what we're responsible for,
right.
But you can't. There is no such thing as like just this one job. Like,
right.
We all impact each other. That's part of being part of the team. That's part of working together, but it's part of being specialized, really.
Right.
And so, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's one of those things that, really, when you come here as a driver at Combined, you're not just a driver. You're not just holding the steering wheel. We always say we don't want a steering wheel holder.
Right.
And you're part of the team.
Absolutely.
And we recognize that top to bottom. So,
yep.
Very cool thing. Well, hey, Jake, I really appreciate having you with us. Now, I always like to kind of do a little fun fact with our guests as we wrap up the end. And I understand that you are an elder with your church. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's accurate. I've been an elder at our church, Upward Church, for the last about 5 years now. And just a fun fact about me. I mean, I think a lot of people that know me, and they know I'm a big Star Wars guy. They know that I like video games. I like my Xbox. But yeah, when it comes to some of my other, and they know that they know about my family. I'm very vocal about my family. But church is a big part of my life too. It's a big part of where I spend a lot of my free time. And so yeah, that's been a learning experience too, and it is also translated well with the leadership, at Combined Transport, and the leadership in the church and what that entails. But it's a big privilege and an honor to be put in that kind of position. But it's something that I enjoy, and it's something that I felt that I've been called to do. So I really enjoy my time doing that and helping others. So I try to bring a lot of that faith and a lot of those beliefs that I have that I exercise in church into the company. And it's a big reason of why I want to make sure that not only people here in the office, but our drivers feel that we're all part of this together, and that we should all be treated and fairly and equally. And it just plays into a lot of how I approach my day-to-day life.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Jake, again, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate having you on. Appreciate you being part of the team. Appreciate your friendship over the years.
Absolutely. Same, Nick.
We'll look forward to doing this again, I think.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you again, Jake, for the interview. Really appreciate your perspective on sales, especially how that ties with drivers, and hopefully it gives some perspective for drivers to see how they can fit into the larger role. You guys are really important out there in more ways than one, and as boots on the ground, you see a lot of stuff that we don't. Our next episode will be out on February 21st. Our guest and a special anniversary callback will be Mike Card, again, to talk about the future of the company, what's happening over the next year, his projections for the market, and what we have to look forward to as we keep on trucking into 2025. Please send us your questions via Facebook or email them to us at cbtalk@combinedtransport.com. We appreciate your participation. It's your engagement that makes this podcast work. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of the Combined Transport team.